Welcome back to the Other Side Lifestyle Podcast. I would highly suggest going to YouTube right now so that you can look at our faces and look at the situation I got going on. So turn it off, go over to YouTube, and look at the beautiful mugs that you see. Today, we are going to teach menopausal women how to eviscerate body fat just by letting your skin touch cold water. That's all you need to know, and you'll eviscerate it. But our guest, Brandon, a repeat guest, is going to explain the magic behind that. So that way you never have to take any accountability of your life. You never have to take any action steps outside of just letting the water touch your skin. You do not have to do difficult things at all ever again once you get used to just letting cold water touch your skin. And that's what we're excited about today, to debunk this myth of calories in, calories out, to debunk the myth of hormones, to debunk the myth that we even need food in general. You just need energy from sun and fat burning from water. So, Brandon, welcome to the show. Also, guess it's been a week since you've heard us, but it's only been one day since I've seen Aram. Still crushing it with the workouts. Still crushing it.
Did you work
it's only
out
been
today?
one day. No. Not today.
And you're not going to work out. There's no chance you're working out tomorrow either.
Tomorrow, possibly.
So that's 2 days. If you don't work out, I've PubMed article 3715 says if you don't train for 2 straight days, you gain at least 10% body fat immediately.
Yeah, I have 2 workouts to get through, and I have until Sunday to do it. So it'll be done.
So you failed already.
No, it's not Sunday yet, a-hole. Everybody say it with me. F you, Aram. Say it with me. This is a weekly thing, Brandon, where we all say F you to Aram for not believing in me.
Brandon, so he's caught up to speed here. Jimmy decided to take his life back into his own hands a few months ago by hiring a coach and caring about his awful physique that he's let go over the last year.
Well, I think I wasn't cold plunging long enough to get the eviscerating fat burning benefits, but go ahead.
And now he's on a regimented eating plan and training again and looks like a human adult.
Hell yeah. Well, Jimmy, congrats on being back at it. I know it's actually been about 2 years since we all linked up. So I think I missed that part of your journey, but it's good just to become consistent. I'm sure you're feeling more like yourself, and this is just getting you into a better routine and structure. And especially considering that you work within this field that, it's good to be really ingrained into it.
Yeah. You feel so much better when you're just doing the movements, doing the action. It feels good. Everybody's wanting this quick fix in terms of a visible result, but the quick fix is immediate when you're actually doing some hard physical things. I mean, there's no better feeling like getting done like a good workout after you're 100%. Pushed. You're like, oh shit, you're like amped up for the day. All of a sudden you're like, let me clean up some of the shit that's laying around my house. You're like more productive. You want to do things.
I think that's something that we all as fitness professionals need to remember. So I'll just give you guys an example. I've been training for 20 years at this point, but there was only one period of time that I ever took off, and it was mandated. I was in a car accident where I got hit by a distracted driver, and I needed 2 surgeries to recover from that. And during that period of time, I was very limited as to what type of training I could do after the second surgery that I had. It was the first time in my adult life that I haven't had the gym as an outlet. And that got me into other types of spiritual practices and things of that sort. And I did types of training, but it was more rehabilitation training than it was like stimulatory hypertrophy training. But it gave me such a greater appreciation, not only for what we're able to do with our bodies on every single day basis, but also where other people are coming from. Because when I went back to the gym to actually lift like heavy loads, and I was going back to doing, multi-joint compound movements, I was lacking structure and stability. I had literally split my abdominal cavity in 2 from the impact of the actual getting hit by a distracted driver. But so I had very little like core stability, trunk stability. There were so many things that I had not been used to being a beginner until like 15 years prior. And it just gave me a greater appreciation. So I'm sure you're able to relate more to your clients. You're able to see where other people are coming from. And it's just been a great, lesson in life. We could take all these experiences, whether you got out of training due to an injury or it was a circumstance within your life that just put essentially a roadblock into you wanting to be into the gym or being able to get to the gym. It's something that you've been able to overcome and learn throughout that process.
Yeah. I think once you're doing it for a while, it's just nice. even if you're starting from square one, I mean, my first workout, I had Bulgarian split squats and I was just doing body weight.
Yeah.
Like body weight. I have zero desire to like jump right back. And it's exciting if you are looking at it from the perspective of, let's see how I progress versus how come I'm not lifting as much as I was a year
100%.
ago. Let's enjoy all of a sudden, okay, I couldn't have done this weight a month ago, and now I'm doing it again. To just be excited about those changes, even if it's not what you once were. So whether you're brand new or you took a long break, again, it's like where our focus is, where our intention is, what do we really want, and outside of just that visible result, which I think holds people up so much.
Absolutely.
So change everybody's life today, Brandon.
All right, so are we going down the menopause path, or are we going to do energy flux?
Let's start with the concept of high flux, because I thought that was an interesting concept to talk about, and then we'll just see how that evolution occurs.
Absolutely. So let me give you guys a little bit of a background definition on energy flux, because this is a concept and essentially a model and approach that I've been using with clients for quite some time, and I've really refined it over the years. But it is something that I have a lot of people that come to me, and I'm sure you guys are in the same situation, that they want to get lean, they want to stay lean. But the biggest roadblock or impediment to that is that many people, and the vast majority, even if we look statistically, have went on a diet and they've lost weight. However, they have not been able to maintain it. And it's often due to the fact that the approach that they either took to get lean or the approach that they're taking in the aftermath, the post-diet phase, is not set up and strategic for them, and it's not something that's sustainable. So when we look at energy flux, I'll give you guys a broad-based perspective. It just essentially refers to our state of energy turnover in the body. So in practical terms, we're looking at the relationship between how much energy you take in through food and how much you expend through all forms of physical activity. So that's going to include things from training to cardio, but really it's really doubled down in daily movement. So how I like to really get it across to clients is I want you to think about putting more energy into the system in terms of eating more food and then pulling more energy out through the system, which is why I often explain it as eat more and move more. And so energy flux, if you look fundamentally into the research, which has only been going on since about 2018 or 2019, but really what they're utilizing it for is as a very effective and efficient way to maintain energy balance. So really when the concept, if you ever look at research and you look in PubMed on energy flux, it's going to be done on what state of energy flux can we maintain energy balance at? So what amount of calories can you take in and maintain your body composition on? And that's what really brings us down to the two states of energy flux that we can be in. There's two different differentiating factors, and that really comes down to how many calories you consume daily and how much activity you engage in daily. So we have the low energy flux approach, which this is what I refer to as a restriction-based model of maintenance. So in this low flux state, you're keeping your body comp stable. You may be maintaining the same body weight, but you're doing it by eating a relatively low number of calories, and you're burning very few calories as a result of that low energy intake. We know that there's an intrinsic relationship between energy intake and energy expenditure. So when you're underfueling yourself, your body's going to downregulate a lot of these processes. So a lot of these people that I see in this situation, and I'm sure you guys are in the same boat, where you'll have people that come to you for coaching, and a lot of them have just finished up their own fat loss phases, or they have a really long history of dieting. And what many people don't realize, especially in the general population, is that you can't keep running an energy deficit for a prolonged period of time. You can't be perpetually in a deficit, because that's going to cause diet-induced metabolic adaptation. So we see all four components of your total daily energy expenditure decrease when you're in a prolonged deficit. So that means your metabolic rate is going to slow, which is due to something called adaptive thermogenesis. We're going to see your NEAT plummet, so you unconsciously move less. Even if you don't realize it, your energy levels are going to drop, and so does training performance with that. And then worst of all, your hunger and appetite spike. And that's really what is the bottleneck for many, because that's when adherence tanks. So when we look at low energy flux, that's what I refer to as that restriction-based model of maintenance, because in order for someone to stay lean doing that, you have to stay restricted in some type of aspect. And that's not something anyone wants to do forever. So what I promote is the opposite end of the spectrum. It's the high energy flux model, which is what I refer to as an abundance-based model of maintenance. So in a high flux state, you're basically maintaining your body composition by eating more and moving more. So you're fueling your body with more energy through food. And as a result of taking in more energy, you're being able to expend more energy through activity. So that could be through your formal training and daily movement. It could be through walking, chores, taking the stairs instead of the escalator or the elevator. And when I have clients in a high flux state, they're able to expend more energy through activity, which allows them to eat more calories and still stay lean. And that's really what I'm trying to build with many of my clients. I'm trying to get them not only mentally in an abundance-based mindset, but also into physically in an abundance-based model of maintenance, where I'm not just keeping them lean, but I'm fueling their lifestyle, their performance, and their recovery with more food, because I not only get people that are restricted from an energy intake perspective, like they've been dieting on low calories, they have a very low maintenance calorie intake, but that's not only inhibiting, say, their hormone production or their metabolic, rate or their total daily energy expenditure, but it's also inhibiting many processes of their life. I work with many busy parents or working professionals, and it's like, they're so like restricted in terms of their food intake that they can't even sniff like a cheeseburger without gaining weight. They can't like go out with their friends and family. And it's not
That's
only,
how I get carbs. I just sniff them.
do you? All right. So we're working by osmosis. So Jimmy's breaking the law of thermodynamics out here. He's doing cold plunges, which actually increase appetite, but somehow he's offsetting it. It's burning fat.
Through sniffing. I sniff pretzels. I used to do that at work all the time. There'd always be like these soft pretzels like in the office at work. And I would go in front of all the women, and I'd open the bag and I'd smell the soft pretzels from this Philly soft pretzel place. And I'd be like, got my carbs for the day. And I'd walk out and they're like, this dude is a psychopath.
I'm sure that got some looks.
Understanding that I'm kidding around. I think some of them, like, I don't think he eats carbs.
Yes.
Brandon, I have an initial question for you as you were starting to go down that line of thought. So I would imagine there's a delay between the increase of activity and then the increase of food that needs to follow that activity. The way that I normally do things, I kind of follow the Poliquin model, which is get somebody doing more shit, watch their biofeedback, and then give them more food as more food is necessary. Is there a delay in between that duration of time? And is there any predictability to that whatsoever?
Absolutely. So it's going to depend on the individual. And I know that that is a statement that you guys often hear. Anyone that's nuanced will say that. However, it really is based on what I do. I'll just tell you my initial intake process. The first thing I'm doing is doing a comprehensive client intake. I'm looking over a variety of factors, both subjective, objective, and then also lab markers. And so what I need to spot, or what my goal is when I'm bringing on a new client and I'm determining, is this person a good candidate for getting into a higher flux state, or would this benefit them along with the phase that I have them going through, is what are their main bottlenecks? So I will give you the example, Aram. If I have someone that is insufficiently active, they're sedentary, they work an office job, but they're not consuming a lot of calories, they're not really fueling themselves properly, or their nutrient density is off, they have poor macronutrient composition, so low protein, maybe excess fat content or excess refined carbohydrates, I will work on the energy intake side first. I will work on the energy expenditure side first, and I will work on activity. So increasing activity, whether that be through cardio. Generally, one of my biggest levers that I pull with most clients is through steps and really integrating activity into their daily lifestyle and into their daily routine. So that would be the energy expenditure first. But often I say, eat more, move more, because with many of the clients that I work with specifically, they are in a downregulated state from constantly being in an energy deficit, or constantly trying to be in an energy deficit and underfueling themselves, eating very low amounts of calories. So the first thing I need to do is reverse some of those diet-induced metabolic adaptations they have. So I work with a lot of individuals that have thyroid issues, whether that's just a downregulation from transient metabolic adaptations. So we're seeing low TSH, low T3, low T4, all in the free components. And that is just basically your entire system has been downregulated. You have downregulated your thyroidal axis. Or I have a lot of people that then on the opposite end of the spectrum have hypothyroidism. So we're having very high TSH. The thyroid gland is signaling, is giving that signaling hormone, but the thyroid gland isn't actually producing sufficient T4 and especially not enough T3. And so with those individuals, I need to work on the food side first. So often I will increase calories first, get their biofeedback into a better place from a subjective perspective where they feel greater energy. They're starting to have bowel movements again. It's going to depend on the client themselves. What is their main bottleneck and what do I need to work on and rectify first? And then I will concomitantly increase activity through one of many vectors. So some people, they aren't resistance training enough. So I need to increase resistance training in terms of frequency and volume. Some people are not doing cardio whatsoever. And I need to increase or include some type of aerobic training just for aerobic capacity, for mitochondrial health, for their ability to oxidize substrates correctly, and especially from like a metabolic flexibility perspective, where they're utilizing fatty acids during low intensity activity and actually properly utilizing carbohydrates at higher intensity activities. And then there's other individuals where it's going to be mostly through step count. They're sufficiently active. They're in the gym. They do a couple cardio sessions a week. And it's like, what type of time do you have? Do you have the opportunity that we could take 10-minute walks after meals? Can we integrate, some type of activity with your family where you go for a walk after dinner? Or we can even do stuff like exercise snacking is something that I'm a really big advocate of, because I worked in an office structure for many years. Every person in that office used to get up, once an hour or once every 2 hours, they would go down to the hall, they would get a snack, or they would go out for a cigarette break, especially back in the day when I was working in an office. And so what I would do is do exercise snacks. I would take and utilize that break time, whether it be 5 or 10 minutes every 1 to 2 hours, and I would go on a walk around the building, or I would go outside and go for a quick walk, or I would do push-ups, or I would do air squats, something of that, just to get some type of activity first and foremost, but also it helps with neuronal activity. It's going to help increase BDNF, so you're having better cognitive focus. I'm sure you guys can relate to the fact that we're all online coaches, and if you sit in front of your computer for an extended period of time, your brain starts to just pretty much malfunction. It's like, I need to take a break, I need to move, I need to do something to just spark that energy.
So interestingly enough, I'm so with that model. I love the concept of it. But I think from a practicality standpoint, me being the cynic that I am and being on the experience side of you're going to get a lot of kickback for, oh, I got to do more shit now, or I got to do more cardio, or I got to take more steps. It's like, well, where am I going to fit this into my lifestyle? Now, you mentioned some practical ways to do it, but I think that you're still going to get individuals are going to tell you that it's just not possible for them. Mm-hmm. When that time comes, what conversation are you having with that person?
With all types of conversations with clients, we have to weigh pros and cons, and we also have to look at things as almost like exchanges. I don't want to look at them as sacrifices, but there is some type of exchange that you have to make, or some type of higher order decision making that you have to make. Like, a lot of people come to me and they want to stay lean. They want to be able to maintain the body composition progress that they've made in the past. They want to be able to eat more. They have all these cross competing goals, because if we were only to look at things in isolation, if you were to say, hey, Brandon, you come to me as a coach, as a client, and you say, I want to get as lean as possible. Okay, so that's going to require energy restriction in some type of way, whether that be increasing energy expenditure, or the most efficacious side would be decreasing energy intake. But those same people also want the best of both worlds, because they want to eat more. They want to be out of this down-regulated state. They want, food flexibility. So we have to have some type of give and take. There's in all aspects of life, there are trade-offs. So that's when I really try to reframe the scheduling of someone's day. So for instance, I work with many busy working professionals as well as business owners. And at first glance, when I'm starting, and now mind you, when I do these increases, we're talking 500 to 1,000 steps per increase, depending on the person. And sometimes it's cardio increase in terms of duration. It can be many different types of levers that I'm pulling and different adjustments that I'm making. But say that I'm utilizing with one individual 500 to 1,000 calorie increase every 2 weeks in terms of their daily step count. And the reason I'm doing that is because if someone comes to me with very low activity levels, they're getting what the average American in the US gets, which is 5,100 steps per day. I can't take them from 5,100 to say what the metabolic threshold would be, which was 8,500 steps per day. If we look at some of the research out of University of Austin, they find that under 8,500 steps per day is where you start seeing what's called exercise resistance, where you actually don't get the benefit from your exercise sessions because you're insufficiently active throughout the day. Well, for some people, just getting them up 3,500 steps is daunting. It's overwhelming. And from a practical perspective, I'm going to stair step them up there. However, that's where we have conversations about someone's schedule. Oftentimes, I'm getting a client's schedule in terms of their daily schedule, their weekend schedule, and then also all the trips, events, vacations, business meetings, all the things that they have in advance, so I can put it on a calendar for myself, so I can integrate these things in there. And then I'm also talking about their free time. And many people tell me, oh, I don't have any free time. All right, well, I want you to take me hour through hour throughout the day of the waking day. So say that you sleep 8 hours and you're awake 16 hours. There is no one, and I have worked with people very high level in terms of Google executives, people working in Silicon Valley, that didn't have spare time throughout their day. People can say that all they want, but it really comes down to this hard conversation saying, all right, well, we have these pockets here. You work from home. Can you get a treadmill desk and alternate between the times that you're on the computer and the times that you're actually on the treadmill and still doing your work when it's lower barrier to entry types of activities? If you're answering emails, can you do that on your walking treadmill desk? And when you're actually doing, say, like spreadsheets and things that are a little bit more attention requiring, can you do that on your computer? And it's really just trying to work with that person and see how we can meet in the middle, because ultimately we all know as coaches, like I always say that my goal is to bridge the gap for individuals, but also to meet them in the middle between what's optimal for their goals and then what's practical for their lifestyle. So with every person I work with, it's different, but I will tell you from practical experience, I've worked with over 1,100 people. I have yet to meet someone that is that busy or as busy as they say they are.
Sorry, I had myself on mute. I can't disagree.
I was muted as well. I started.
I can't disagree. I mean, I've done the schedule audits for people plenty of times, and there's obviously people that are going to be resistant just to the initial idea of the schedule audit, because it's almost like, to them, it almost feels gaslighting, or it feels invalidating. It's like, well, how dare you not believe me that I don't have a spare moment? It's like, I heard you talk about Netflix shows last week.
Mm-hmm.
I heard you tell me about the coffee trips that you had and the lunches you had out. So clearly, you have a prioritization issue, and you have a problem saying no to things that don't benefit you. And I think that's where, like, listen, we can sit here and we can harp about the science of all this stuff, and we can drill all of these concepts into people's heads. But at the end of the day, what it all comes down to is somebody's willingness to make these adjustments into their lifestyle in a way that doesn't feel daunting and disruptive to them. That's the hard part. That's the psychology part. And until we can get that dialed in, it's hard to use any of these amazing protocols that we can put together as coaches.
But that's where that self-awareness needs to happen. And sometimes an audit on your time is necessary. If you are the person who's saying, I don't have the time, you owe it to yourself to do an audit. If you're the person who's saying, I can't lose any weight no matter what I'm doing, you owe yourself an audit of tracking calories, actually doing the thing you've been avoiding. Usually it's like the thing that we've been avoiding is the thing that would cause us to have a breakthrough in any area of our life. Like, we're just so resistant to that one thing. And it's like, hey, you need that radical, take radical responsibility, of your life. And it starts with that audit. So they might be triggered, but they got to do the audit.
Aram, another thing that I really try to integrate into my clients' lifestyles when I'm trying to get them into this higher energy flux lifestyle is I'm really looking at non-exercise activities. I don't want them to associate it with just exercise itself, because oftentimes that can have almost like a compensatory rebound effect where they want to, they're on the cardio machine and they're trying to do cardio for cheeseburgers and like shit like that. I don't want them to actually do. Really what it comes down to is integrating within their lifestyle. So a lot of times I will already look at what they're doing currently. So say they're in the gym and they're in the gym 60 minutes, 3-4 times a week. Well, a lot of times I ask clients all the time and I get the same response every single time. What do you do in between sets of working out? They either say sit down and rest, or they're on their phone. I say do laps around the gym. The same thing can be said about your normal chores that you do around the house. You could just be a little bit more active. And instead of, a big thing that I've really actually encouraged a lot of clients to do is, instead of ordering Uber Eats or any of these drive-by services, like go to the grocery store, walk the aisles, get the things that you need. It causes many things to happen. Oftentimes they're able to integrate a little bit more diet variability and variety because they're seeing different seasonal, produce and things of that sort, but also it gets them some movement. So this could be easy stuff like cleaning. It could be taking the stairs instead of taking the elevator. Stop being like relying on convenient things. It could be parking at the back of a parking lot rather than taking the first spot. I see people all the time, especially in the gym, which I always find so ironic. The gym I go to, a lot of people are fighting for that like top spot because it is a very large parking lot. And it's like, dude, by the time you find a spot, I've already parked way in the back where my car is safe. I've already walked there and I've gotten some steps in. And so these are little low barrier to entry things that can be done. And over time, they will accumulate, 500 steps here, 500 steps there, they all add up. And it's really about realizing I'm trying to lower the barrier of entry for many clients where it's not overwhelming. And they realize, oh, these little things I do throughout the day, they make a considerable difference on my body composition, my activity levels, my energy expenditure, my maintenance calorie intake, my metabolic health, all these little things that we can sprinkle in. It's not about like, bullseye or bust in terms of you either have 30 minutes to do cardio or you do nothing. It's like, hey, can you do a 5-minute walk after some of your meals? Can you integrate some push-ups after you have a meal or after one of these activities that I really say meals a lot of times because I like to habit stack. And it's something like, hey, if you're eating 3 to 4 times a day, just make a reminder to yourself to do a little activity after, especially from a post-meal glucose metabolism perspective, where we see less of an increase in insulin and glucose area under the curve when you do some activity right after a meal.
Yeah, a lot of these things really are low barrier to entry, and just general. I mean, people always ask me like, "How do you get so many steps in?" Well, whenever I'm talking to a client on the phone, I'm just pacing around my apartment. I'm literally keeping my screen door open, walking in and out of the house. And if it's an hour, sometimes they're an hour phone call, I can get 2,500 steps in that hour very, very easily. I always tell, mostly my female clients, I'm like, hey, if you haven't caught up with a friend in a while, instead of going out to dinner, why don't you guys go grab coffee and go for a walk? Or
Absolutely.
if you can't meet that person in person, call them on the phone and do what I do and go and pace around and catch up that way. There's so many ways to get activity done and into your life. Now, it's the easiest lever to pull. It's the one that I think is probably the most overlooked as important, because everybody's always going to ask you, well, what is the best workout, or
Mhm.
what is the best cardio regimen that I should be doing? And it's like, well, you're not even getting 6,000 steps in a day. Let's start with getting that number up. And obviously, these are different tools for different jobs. And I want you to talk about what different jobs these different tools do, right? If we were to break down what NEAT does
Yeah.
from an efficacy standpoint, what the role of cardio is and what the benefits of that is, and then what the role of weightlifting is and what the benefits of that is. So just people have a very concrete idea of why they're doing these three different things.
All right. So when I'm going to take NEAT first. So NEAT, just so everyone out in the audience, if you're not familiar with the terminology, it refers to non-exercise activity thermogenesis. And this includes all the physical activity that you do throughout the day that is in the form of formal exercise. So this is going to be separated from things like your resistance training and your cardio sessions. So NEAT is going to include walking around the house, cleaning, fidgeting, taking the stairs, grocery shopping and carrying groceries, even maintain your posture is a form of NEAT, because NEAT refers to the actual calorie burning that comes from non-exercise activities. And actually, what a lot of people don't realize is it's the most variable component of your total daily energy expenditure. And that's actually one of the main reasons that I focus on it, because now I'm utilizing this model with a lot of people that have a long dieting history. And what a lot of people don't realize is that NEAT is the component of your total daily energy expenditure that down regulates the most, meaning that the largest percentage of the calories, of the decrease in calories we burn during a dieting phase, actually comes from the NEAT component. So there's great research from Rosenbaum and Leibel that looks at a 10% weight loss. And they looked at each component of metabolic adaptation, and they broke it down and found that individuals that had lost 10% or more of body weight had decreased their total daily energy expenditure on a daily basis by 500 calories. Now, when they separated that into different components, they found 100 calories of that 500 calorie reduction came from resting metabolic rate, which is what a lot of people really heavily focus on. Oh, I broke my metabolism. I had metabolic damage. I'm in starvation mode. Many of these things are not the case. However, when they actually looked at what the remaining balance was, 80% of the downregulation in that total daily energy expenditure came from non-exercise activity thermogenesis, from decreases in spontaneous movement and physical activity. And so really when it comes down to it, NEAT is going to be something that's going to increase calorie burn. NEAT is vastly modifiable, meaning that it can range quite substantially between two individuals. So there's great research from the 90s that looks at different occupational activities and how much calories that they burn. And a researcher that actually coined the term NEAT, and James Levine, has done immense research on this. And what they found is that someone in an office could burn 400 calories per day through NEAT, and someone working a intensely laborious job can burn 2,400 calories per day. Now, here's the interesting thing. They were matched for body weight, age, sex, and also BMI. So same body composition, same anthropometric data and statistics, but they were burning vastly different calories. So what we see is that two people of the same body weight, body composition can differ in calorie burn just from the NEAT component by 2,000 calories per day. And so NEAT is really helping with that non-intensive way of increasing energy expenditure. And that's why I put a lot of focus on it. And NEAT would actually be, if you're doing steps throughout the day, generally that's going to count through NEAT. Now, when we look at cardio is looking for a cardiovascular adaptation. So that could be from in terms of like stroke volume or blood plasma levels, or it could be just cardiovascular health. So that is going to be at a higher intensity. And now there's a lot of debates over like cardio zones and things. For most general population clients, they don't really have to get into that. Just go do cardio, if you're integrating into your program at a level in which you can have a conversation, but it's not like you're lackadaisical. It should be different than your walking pace, which is something that I find very interesting, where people say that they're doing cardio, but it's literally so leisurely that they could do it outside, like on a walk. Cardio should be a little bit more intensive. If we look, much of the research is done on zone 2 cardio. So we're looking at, say, 55 to 65% of VO2 max or heart rate max. And that's going to have vastly beneficial implications and downstream effects on your cardiovascular health. So that is another way to burn calories, but I like really utilizing cardio more either during a fat loss phase when I'm trying to maximize their amount of calories burned per minute, or I'm trying to get those cardiovascular adaptations. So if I have someone that has cardiovascular disease in their family, or they have issues with blood lipids, or they have glucose metabolism issues, so they have high insulin levels or they're insulin resistant, these are things that it's a little bit easier in terms of a time efficacy perspective to utilize cardio to improve those modalities. Then when it comes to resistance training, this is what is going to build the body that you want. So this is the number one type of training that is utilized for body composition improvement. So that is what's going to help you build lean mass or retain it during a deficit. And it's what's going to give you your shape. You shouldn't be utilizing resistance training purely for its calorie burning effects, because quite honestly, when we compare resistance training versus cardio versus even NEAT, resistance training gets blown out of the water in terms of its actual ability to burn calories, because it's an intermittent activity. So it's intense. It is a glycolytic, high intensity activity during the sets themselves. But think about the cadence at which you train. You may do a set, say you have 12 reps and it takes you 20 to 30 seconds, but then you're resting 2.5 to 3 minutes to get a sufficient rest interval and to regenerate ATP so that you have less of a drop off in work capacity. So you're seeing less of a drop off in reps per set across the sets of an exercise. So it's intermittent. So really, when it comes down to it, if we're looking for calorie burn, we can utilize NEAT as well as cardio. And then when we're looking for actual body composition improvement, whether that be increasing and adding lean muscle tissue, which is going to help from a metabolic perspective because it's going to increase more calories. It's going to help with, your health in terms of bone health and also increasing bone mineral density. Like all those things are going to be best done through resistance training. So there's a different tool for a different job, but the best way to approach this is through a multimodal type of program. So I never look at things as me being a hammer and everything's a nail. It's like I have resistance training for these particular goals. I have cardio for these particular goals, and I have steps for these particular goals. And they're in different buckets. And obviously they have to be accounted for within the programming of that client, and also the way that I'm manipulating their nutrition, the modifications I'm making to macronutrient composition and things of that sort. But it's all an integrated program. It's not looking at just one to do all the work.
Well, I think one of the biggest issues that we see in the coaching world is the understanding of each thing independent of what its impact on nutrition is, right? And I think the field of bioenergetics is probably one of the places where your average pedestrian coach just doesn't have enough knowledge in that space. They understand that training is important for all those several reasons. They know what cardio is and what the benefits are. They know what the benefits of NEAT, but they don't understand how the human body reacts to all of these different activities. So they don't really know how to fuel that person in those different endeavors. And I think when you can understand how to match fitness to nutrition properly, you've truly empowered the client to be their best self. And what I've seen over the course of my career is the more understanding I got of things like calorie burn during all these different modalities, or the impacts of having carbohydrates before a lifting session, or maybe having some higher fat days prior to some more endurance endeavors. You now start to get a person really dialed in. They start getting results at a little bit more of a rapid pace, and they have a higher level of satisfaction doing this stuff, which allows for a lot better adherence. So I want you to talk about the component of fueling these different activities. Now, obviously, we don't have to fuel NEAT. If anything, we should just be doing that stuff. But you had mentioned glycolytic. You talked about aerobic and all that stuff. Very, very simply, if you could just just discuss this aspect of it a little bit, so people can understand the relationship of things like carbohydrates and fats, and how just because the body uses those things during exercise doesn't necessarily mean that we're burning off the fat that we actually have on our body.
Absolutely. So I think that in a broad perspective, one, I guess, advantage or benefit that I've seen in clients utilizing this approach where it's multimodal, I'm increasing energy flux, they're eating more, they're getting sufficiently fueled, but they're also doing higher levels of activity, is alluding to something that you're referencing, which is increased and enhanced metabolic flexibility, meaning that clients are getting better at switching between fat and carbohydrate oxidation depending on the intensity of exercise, which is not only important for performance, but also if you look into the metabolic health literature, metabolic inflexibility, which is the opposite of metabolic flexibility, it's a key marker of metabolic dysfunction. So we see that really highly tied to insulin resistance and also metabolic syndrome. So when we look at the different types of activities, I'm big into the concept of fueling for the work required. And this is kind of how I get it across to my clients. I want to match the substrate or the energy source that is going to be most used in that training session. So for instance, when it comes down to let's separate resistance training and cardio. And oftentimes I do this within my programming because I utilize a nutritional periodization to all phases that I take someone through. So I'll give you guys a broad-based perspective, but say on their resistance training days, I'm generally going to use a higher calorie day that's going to include higher carbs, moderate fat, and usually it's moderate to high protein. And the reason for that is I want to utilize the concept of nutrient timing, especially around that peri-workout window, meaning before, potentially during, depending on the calorie intake of the individual or their goals, and then after. So I'm giving the body exactly what it needs from an energetic perspective, because carbohydrates are the preferred fuel source of high intensity activity. It's a glycolytic activity that relies off glucose metabolism. So by providing the body with what it needs, it's going to have a better ability to utilize those substrates first and foremost. And then after we train, we actually have improved insulin sensitivity. And that's really driven in part by a increase in GLUT4 translocation, which is activated in a non-insulin mediated way. So we actually get two advantages from this. When you eat carbohydrates post-workout, you're not only able to absorb them and increase the glucose absorption without the need for insulin as much, but also you're able to restore glycogen in a much more, you're able to replenish glycogen in a much more readily time frame. But the best thing about that is that that's one of the best times to have carbohydrates, because your body is secreting less insulin from the pancreas due to the fact that you've translocated those GLUT4 receptors from the inner cellular membrane to the outside to absorb and let in glucose, because muscular contractions increase GLUT4 translocation in that non-insulin mediated way, whereas usually we would need insulin to dock to the insulin receptor on a muscle cell to let that glucose in. So that's one of the advantages, or that's one of the approaches that I utilize. So I like to use a approach where I call it an undulating calorie cycle. So on resistance training days, which are their highest energy demanding days, where that's really, for a lot of my clients, they're very body composition focused. They want to build lean mass. They really want to become stronger, more muscular versions of themselves. I'm really prioritizing more calories on those days. And then if we have non-training days, I will utilize a little bit of a different macronutrient composition. So protein's still going to stay high. I'm going to raise the fats a little bit higher, and then I'm going to decrease the carbs, which generally will help with insulin sensitizing effects. It also allows me to utilize a lower calorie intake on those days, which can offset some, say I have someone in a surplus, it's able to offset some of that surplus. I put more of those surplus days on the high calorie training days that are resistance training focused. And then on the cardio days where they're having less of, muscle breakdown and they don't need as much substrates for a repair process, they're able to utilize more of, fatty acids for energy. And those are the days I generally will drive cardio, because cardio, for the most part, if we're doing zone 2 especially, is an aerobic activity. So it's going to rely off fatty acid metabolism. So I'm pretty much providing the substrate that is best used for the activity that we're utilizing. Now, NEAT is technically an aerobic activity, and so is your in between your rest periods in between the gym. So all these activities have different fuel utilization pathways that they utilize, but really for things like NEAT, even just running your resting metabolic rate or recovery in between sets at the gym, you don't need to specifically fuel those things. That's actually just increasing your fatty acid oxidation and usage of fatty acids in a manner which is just going to improve metabolic flexibility. So really when it comes down to it, if I'm looking at from a fuel perspective, I'm really fueling most predominantly and most specifically on resistance training days versus cardio days, which really are broken off between resistance training days being high calorie training days, and then the cardio days being a little bit lower calorie, higher fat, non-training days in terms of non-training from a resistance training perspective.
And I think that now the hard part, obviously, again, is, as always, it comes back down to adherence. Mm-hmm. And I've all approaches that I would use, all approaches I completely agree with. I think the hard part is we have to make very, very clear to our clients and to anybody that's listening and to anybody that's trying to enter into this place of I want to understand this stuff better and apply it better to myself. All of this hinges on consistent and accurate tracking of food intake.
Absolutely.
And without that as your bedrock habit and foundational habit, I don't care what you think you want to accomplish, what your desires are. You and I, Jimmy, Jesus himself, could come down from the heavens and couldn't apply any of these protocols to anybody if they don't have a good idea of what's actually happening day to day from a caloric intake standpoint. And I'm not saying to 100% level of precision, because we know that's not possible for most people, but at least be consistent about it, right? Like, one of the most challenging things to do, especially when you're dealing with clientele that wants body composition improvement or sustained fat loss, is you have this idea of like, well, I want to do all this stuff and I want to make all these changes, but I'm not tracking my food on the weekends, or I'm not prepping food when I'm going off on trips because I'm staying in hotels and I don't want to grocery shop, and I'm going to eat out 3 meals a day, which we know all of your restaurant meals are going to be substantially more calorie dense than they are the equivalent of what you would make at home. Even if you're trying to make the best possible choices while you're eating out, you still don't have any idea what the amount of oil that they're cooking in. You can't quantify any of that stuff. So I want you to really emphasize the idea that all of the success of these protocols and these ideologies hinges on the fact that you're preparing and eating most of your own food.
No, 100%. Especially in the beginning, I am someone that, especially when I'm trying to get someone into this higher flux state, remember, I'm making increases in calories quite strategically, but it also does require that someone is tracking. However, I will say on the opposite end of that spectrum, a lot of times what ends up happening, I'll go over, maybe some of the benefits that are more practical to this approach, but I do see enhanced adherence. And that's part and due to better nutritional flexibility. So I have clients that have gone from such a restricted state, and as I've been able to build their intake as well as their expenditure up, they're less restricted and they're more well fueled. And we have to think about the downstream benefits of having a higher intake from being in this downregulated low flux state into a high flux state. Many of these people have been barely being able to really get satiated, or they've been barely able to enjoy themselves. And then when they're able to increase their intake, obviously we have to do this accurately and make sure that someone's tracking. And that really comes down to what I consider empowering clients through education. I'm very big on education, whether it be through podcasts or even just my one-on-one consultations, as well as my one-on-one interactions with clients. All this stuff, I think I get greater buy-in on a lot of these topics, or even a lot of these approaches, because I will front load them with a ton of education and really explain the ideology behind it, the research behind it. I'm going through both, the literature and what it says, but also my practical experience, having worked with well over 1,100 clients at this point. And so it gets greater buy-in, and then they see the results for themselves. So a lot of times I am seeing enhanced adherence as we get deeper into the process. And, that comes from a multitude of things. They feel less restricted. They have a higher intake, which allows for greater food variety and micronutrient density. So I'm also having downstream implications on their hormones, on their mood, on their cognition. They're having improved satiety, and that's going to lead to better appetite management and more consistent adherence. And they have better energy, mood, and diet satisfaction. So these are all things that have vastly beneficial effects on their ability to stick to a plan. The other thing that a lot of people overlook, and this is something even I've covered this topic many times, whether it be on podcasts or presentations, and a lot of people have tuned out, or I haven't even been able to get into this. But what a lot of people don't realize is the appetite dysregulating effects of being sedentary. And I don't think a lot of people have hit on that, but we have a vast body of research which shows that when you're in a low flux state, if you are at sedentary levels, your appetite is often dysregulated. And research finds that when individuals are insufficiently active, they feel hungrier despite moving less, and they don't feel as much of a fullness or satiety signal after meals, so they're more likely to overeat. However, when we actually look at the literature, and there is controlled trials looking at this, comparing low flux versus high flux, when we increase daily movement, and this oftentimes in these studies, it's just due to like steps or just general physical activity. But even in the real world, we could do cardio or structured training or general physical activity. We naturally become more sensitized to satiety signals, and we're better able to terminate our meals without overeating. And there's actually multiple studies where they allow participants to eat ad libitum, which essentially just means they can eat as much as they wanted. And these individuals, when they compare them, the guys in the high activity groups ate more appropriately relative to their energy expenditure than the low activity groups. So we have a vast body of literature that shows that if you are to get to moderate to higher levels of physical activity, you will feel better satiety, better appetite regulating effects. And then also you will be more adept at matching your energy intake to your energy expenditure, which is almost like, I don't want to say it's a foolproof safe. It isn't by any means, but it's going to get a lot of people, they don't understand what hunger and satiety are. We're in a modern environment where there's hyperpalatable foods. There's so much food cues in the environment where most people really don't know what it's like to actually feel hungry and then actually know when to terminate a meal when they actually feel satiated rather than they feel stuffed. And that's a huge issue because so many people, and I'm sure you guys have seen this, they are habitual overeaters. It's either they're underfueling themselves or they're overeating in excess. And so really being able to get someone more in tune with their natural satiety signals where they could stop and terminate a meal when it's enough, not when it's in excess, is a huge, skill that I've seen really benefit so many clients I've worked with.
I think most people can, understand. I can't think of the word right now. I want to say empathize or whatever, but with that, when you're moving, I mean, when you're moving and you're busy, you're not sitting around thinking about food. I mean, most
Absolutely.
people are eating because they're bored. So yeah, totally makes sense. Just even from a mental outside of the physiological aspects of increased hunger and dysregulated, ghrelin, leptin, all those things. You're sitting around, you just want to eat. You're bored. You're moving around. Like how many little kids are playing all day and they're like, I forgot to eat. I know my son
100%.
does that when he's got a busy day. I know when I'm active doing things just around the house, I'm not thinking about food. So from own personal experience, I think we can all relate to that.
I think
Agreed.
the concept of food noise or food obsession is very much an environmental narrative that's been created because of this hyper palatable environment that we live in. I mean, I'm guilty of this too, Brandon, right? Like if you look at my explore page on Instagram,
It's food
it's
porn,
nothing
probably.
but it's food porn. It's
Yeah.
all food. It's dogs and food porn. It's pizza, cheeseburgers, cookies, cakes, chips, bullshit. Because it's entertaining. Because I'll go and try to find new restaurants in San Diego or new coffee shops. Now, am I going to go there every single day and sample all this stuff all the time?
I'm
No.
I'm getting
Well,
I'm getting dodgeball vibes right now, like where he had the pizza, then he had like the shockers up to his nipples, and he would like like he wants the food, and then he shocks himself to not eat it. That's what I'm picturing you
white
looking at the
goodness.
videos on Instagram, and then be like, "No, you're a bad boy, bad boy.
Well,
Don't eat that food.
I
Don't go to
mean,
that restaurant."
we can laugh about it, but at the end of the day, it's just having even the skill set of being able to take a bite or two or three of something and set it down,
To
right? As
recognize
opposed
you
to
just want to taste it.
yeah,
You know, like
because
Thanksgivings, the parties, all that stuff. It's like you just want to taste it, but then you like the taste, you just want to keep tasting it. But nothing changed about those tastes. You just want to keep tasting it, and then you get to that point where you're like, "Oh, stuffed." You feel
well,
like
it's like
crap. Why did I eat so
it's
much?
it's almost like the concept of diminishing marginal satisfaction,
Yeah,
right? Like each subsequent bite of a hyperpalatable food loses its allure, and at some point you're just finishing it to finish it. A, because you've maybe been indoctrinated in a family that taught you to never waste food or never throw out food or finish your plate, or you feel some financial obligation. I paid $7 for this coffee, even though it sucks. I'm going to finish it. Or I paid $8 for this slice of cheesecake. I want to finish it to get my money's worth. But as an adult with agency and a person who has goals, it's not hard to be able to disassociate yourself to be able to say, "Hey, none of this stuff is scarce." Right, Brandon? I think that's another place that we see a lot of our clients coming
Absolutely.
from is this scarcity mindset around food. Like these donut shops are not closing anytime soon.
No.
Your favorite
Same thing can be
restaurant,
said about the holidays.
right? Like these things are going to come around every single year, predictably at the same times. You know that you can go on vacation, and there's been plenty of times that you've gone on vacation, overindulged, not felt good about it. And then there's been vacations that people have gone on, came home, lost weight, felt better because they moved all vacation, they ate better, right? There's a difference between going on vacation to an all-inclusive or on or like on a boat on a cruise versus going to Costa Rica where you're hiking and eating fresh fruits and vegetables and seafood all day long, and that's your only food availability.
yeah.
People come back from those trips feeling better than they left. And
100%.
Just because it's all inclusive doesn't mean you have to eat all of it.
right? But when it's
But it's like
there,
that's that mindset. It's like I got to get it all because I
it's it's
can.
it's no different than when you're sitting in front of the TV at 8:30 at night, winding down, and now the pantry is 17 feet away, and it's no holds barred, and that's the problem. So I
Well,
think a
and you're not
lot
going to
of
get
this.
it takes so many calories of hyperpalatable food to even get to a point where you're feeling full. I mean,
Oh
have you ever been full from eating a whole sleeve of Pringles?
no,
I don't
Once you
think it's
pop the fun
possible.
don't stop. That's why they had those
That's it.
all those
Yeah.
catchphrases. Bet you can't eat just one. These are things. Not only if we actually look at the research and the physiology behind ultra processed foods. I mean, I did a huge deep dive into food addiction and then how hyperpalatable foods hijack your reward system, and we really see dopamine signaling quite similar to we do with other addictive drugs. If you actually a researcher named Ashley Gerhardt actually was the one that termed and also created something called the Yale Addiction Food Scale. And when she looked into literature, she actually compared food addiction, and they did this with the um, Surgeon General's actually layout of how they classified cigarettes in the 80s as an addictive substance. And they looked at all 4 components that were made an addictive substance and found that hyperpalatable foods, especially highly processed or ultra processed hyperpalatable foods, were the ones that really fit that same type of characteristic in terms of the actual criteria of being addictive. Now, is it physiologically addictive where you will die without it? Absolutely not. We can have the debate about food in terms of energy from an energetic perspective. Yes, we need food to survive, but you don't need hyperpalatable food to survive. But we do see an effect on dopamine signaling that's similar to caffeine, nicotine, tobacco, all these things. And so there's a physiological ramification of that. If we look at Kevin Hall's well-controlled research in the metabolic ward, they looked at 2 weeks of being in a ultra processed diet versus 2 weeks on a whole foods diet. And there was a discrepancy of over 500 calories per day of an increase when they were on the ultra processed food diet. They gained a kilogram, 2.2 pounds over those 2 weeks as compared to losing a kilogram over 2 weeks on a whole foods diet. We see many implications of that downstream. So we have the physiology, it's hijacking the reward system. It's causing dopamine signaling, which causes that desire to want more. It's almost like, if you really think about it, a lot of times when we go to these restaurants or even with your clients, it's like, it almost pulled me in. I smelled like the bakery, the baked goods outside of the bakery, or I smell the pizza. We get ready to get a dopamine response. And also, if you actually look into it, there's a lot of research looking at Pavlovian conditioning, which was originally Pavlov did it on dogs, but it was just the cue that initiated the dogs to think that food was in the region. So if you look at Pavlov's old work, it was when they originally saw the clerk or the person that was used to set out the food, they would start salivating. And then it became the bell. They reassociated. It's called cue conditioned eating associations. So they recondition things. We have the same thing as humans. We have associated food with comfort, food with self-medication, food with an outlet for emotional distress. We have made food, essentially we've pathologized it to the point that a lot of people are looking at food as everything else but for community, for culture, and for subsistence. And so we really have to disentangle that. But then we also have the psychological ramifications. A lot of people in our industry, and especially people that are fitness focused, have dichotomous thinking. They think in black and white, all or nothing. So it's either I'm on plan or I'm off plan. So Aram, in your instance, when someone gets the $7 coffee, it's like, you know what? I already indulged in, say, 150 out of the 300 calories that was in that latte. I just have to drink it all. You don't. If you are able to look at things from a flexible restraint mindset and say, listen, I had 150 calories. I was satiated from that. I got a little caffeine. I got that dopamine rush. I'm able to put this down. I'm not in scarcity in terms of calories or from a monetary perspective, because if you're paying $7 every single day for coffee, I'm sure you're doing well financially. You could put it away. And we have to think of things. I talk to clients. I get a lot of type A clients that are very black and white, rigid, restraint type of mindset. And that actually predicts poor outcomes, both in weight loss trials and weight loss maintenance trials. And really what it comes down to, realizing that you don't have to be perfect. We need to aim for progression, but you can't have the phenomenon of, I had a cookie, I have to have the entire tray. Or that's the same type of ideology as if my car, if I had a flat tire and then I slashed all the other 3, like I just added insult to injury when it really could be easily rectified. Have the cookie, adjust your calories the next day. Have the cookie, enjoy it, and realize, hey, I got what I needed, and try to ingrain that flexible restraint mindset. So we have to have restraint. If you actually look into any type of body composition improvement, there is a necessary degree of restraint. And restraint, all that refers to is that there is an intentional and purposeful modification of what we eat or how much we eat for a body composition goal or for a fitness goal or for a health goal. Now, restraint in some type of form is necessary, but you don't have to have rigid restraint where you put yourself up on this pedestal where you either nail it 100% or you're 100% off, or I'm on the diet or I'm off the bandwagon. We have to look at things, especially from this industry, as it's about chasing perfection or chasing progression, not perfection.
Jimmy, do you have a minute so I can ask him about, because I want to be respectful of your time. I know you got shit going on this afternoon. Yeah. So you had alluded to the idea of adjusting your calories the next day or the next subsequent days. And I had a Zoom meeting with all my clients yesterday because I'm of the school of thought that nutrition falls into 2 camps, the physiological camp and the psychological camp. And when you can bridge those gaps, that's when people's relationship with food improves. And I think there's this disordered eating community that's going to be very black and white on a lot of things, like tracking calories is disordered, and eating less the day after an overeating spell is disordered. I call bullshit on that. I think it's very much individually specific. And I want you to talk about the physiological benefits, if you think there are, to, let's say you go out to dinner on Saturday night. You normally eat 3 or 4 meals a day. You've already had 2 meals that day. and you had the appetizer, you had the cocktail, you had the dinner, you had the dessert. It clocked in at 1,200 calories, and now you've gone 700 calories over your maintenance. Does it make sense on Sunday, Monday, whatever, to lower those calories, to put yourself back into a place of at least energy balance? And if the goal is fat loss, maybe even into a deficit and adjust downward.
Absolutely. So when we're looking at, I'm going to refer to this, and this is how I refer to it as clients, as energy adjustments throughout the week. So I'm really taking it and I'm making it from like a calorie and macro banking perspective, and we're just reallocating funds. So I look at almost like a financial analogy. Usually you would spend this amount every single day per week. Say it was $100 is your budget per day, $700. Instead, on Saturday, you spent $300. So now on Sunday, we got to pull back a little bit just to keep yourself in balance. And so, yes, I think actually the more advantageous perspective is actually what you're doing, Aram. So it is to adjust the days after. And the reason I say this is there is a lot of people that do the opposite. They will, leading into an event, they will undereat or try to adjust their nutrition. So that could be going to a low day structure, or eating, taking out their extra carbohydrates and fats the days leading into. Often and we see this in the literature, but I've seen this from experience because I've tried both ways, is that oftentimes that leads to even more of a blowout on, say, that Saturday. Because now someone is coming in having eaten less, they feel a little bit more restricted, and they feel like they have much more room and margin to play with. I would rather someone play almost catch up than feel like they're way too ahead of the game and get way too confident and then really go overboard. So I don't want to encourage in excess. Yes, if you want to have a meal, by all means. If you want to go a little bit over, 700 calories, no worries. The one thing I do like to do, I don't like them to make up for it the next day. Just the next day, meaning I wouldn't, if they were 700 calories over and they were trying to maintain either maintenance or a deficit the next day, say they were hypothetically in a 500 calorie deficit, but now they're 700 calories over maintenance, that's a 1,200 calorie delta. I don't want them to make that up on the next day. And another thing is a conversation I have with clients is, are you doing this out of an adjustment to hit your goal, or is this out of punishment? I don't want guilt associated with those adjustments. I want it that you are doing this from a actual perspective of flexible cognitive restraint, meaning I have the flexibility that I took that high day on. I like to refer to it as a flexible high day. This is how I refer to it with my clients. So I'll give them an extra calorie budget. And then if we're in with the goal of fat loss, I will adjust the next couple days. So say they went 600 calories over. I gave them a 600 calorie budget. We're going to do this it's right before July 4th. Some of my clients that are in dieting phases that have events coming up, I gave them, say, hypothetically, a 600 calorie budget tomorrow, which is July 4th. Well, now the next 3 days following July 4th, it would be 200 calories under their normal dietary intake. So it's not drastic, but it's enough to offset. Now, a big thing with that is that we actually see most times people, if they have good satiety signaling and things of that sort, a day after a overfeeding day, you'll actually eat less. We see that in the overfeeding literature. For most people, that's going to be pretty easy to go those next 2 days. And maybe on that third day, when they're in a 200 calorie greater deficit than they normally were, it's going to be a little bit difficult, but we can always rationalize that and have that conversation with a client. Hey, consider if this is worth it. Everything in life is a trade-off. The one thing I don't like doing is, and I don't do with clients, is if someone has a past of eating disorder, or they have something clinical, or they have a really poor relationship with food where it's almost out of guilt that they're doing these things, they feel obligated. And it's almost a form of punishment, where we see that both in terms of food manipulation and restriction, and also exercise bulimia. I don't want it to go to that. And so that is where I will put a stopgap, and I have to talk to them about giving themselves grace. If you went over and you think this was a mistake, we can always learn from that experience, but I don't want any compensatory behaviors, because I also originally came from the bodybuilding realm where people would trash people after they slipped up off their diet. They would make them do excessive cardio, cut their calories, make very aggressive adjustments. And I can't tell you, especially from a female perspective, I mostly work with women at this point, how many women come to me and they have a poor relationship with food, because of those experiences, having competed before and having worked with a very rigid restraint mindset coach who is very black and white and aggressive in terms of their manipulations. And the second thing is that they've been scolded by their coach. I'm a big believer in just being open and communicative with my clients. And I'm coming from a place of absolutely no judgment. If you make a mistake, I've made mistakes. Aram, you've made mistakes. Jimmy, you've made mistakes. This is never something to be concerned about. We can always make adjustments, but I don't want any type of guilt or feeling as though you're going to get scolded in that process. And that's something we as a coaching industry really need to work on. I find that I've been coaching, honestly, I incorporated my business in 2013 online, and I started coaching people in 2010. So I've kind of seen it all. But really, when I go back to, a lot of people did, I don't want to say damage, but they did harm essentially to a lot of clients' psychology and mindset by being way too hard on them. And I came from a bodybuilding background, so don't get me wrong. I I coached many high level competitors, even up to the Olympia, but the restraints or the types of adjustments or even type of communication style that you use with a high level athlete that they're counting on you to make sure that they make it to the show of their life, like the biggest show in their life, is not the way that you talk to a general population client that has 3 kids, has a mortgage, has, a husband to take care of, she's got all 3 of the kids, she's got the big kid. And these are things that can have implications that a lot of coaches didn't realize. And now I'm sure you guys are in the same boat where you're almost trying to rectify some of the mistakes of coaches prior to you. And so I'm very intentional with my words and with the way that I phrase things. It's not, hey, I want you to compensate for this meal that you had yesterday because you fucked up. That never comes into the situation. It is, hey, we're going to make adjustments to make sure you're still in alignment with your goals. And if that adjustment, say on the 3rd day, it's too much, we can always go back. All you'll be is 200 calories down for the week. And if you're in a 3,500 calorie deficit, we're talking about 1/17th of a fucking pound. That is even minuscule and practically meaningless.
Yeah, even if people understood. I mean, if you went over 500-600 calories in one day and then you didn't do the 200 calorie added deficit over the next 3 days, that's still such a small percentage of the weekly deficit that you've accrued. So, okay, absolutely. You lost, if all things are perfect, you lost 0.75 pounds instead of 1.
Yeah.
Like, oh no, so that is where people have to figure out. And we've talked about, me and Aram talk about so much of just having that curious perspective with everything. Let me see if I feel better doing all 600 the next day, or if I feel better spreading it out, or if I'm just okay. Yeah, I didn't lose 1/4 of a pound what I could have this week when you have your whole life to get to wherever you want to go. So it's like having that curious mindset, experimenting with things. We've talked so much about that. Like it would save people so much stress.
I think another thing that I've really changed, if I'm talking about a coaching philosophy, when I first, especially from like 2013 to 2018, I mostly worked with high level competitors and I had a set date I had to get them ready for. There was no ifs, ands, buts, objections, prolonging, delays, nothing. And I've really gotten into this model where I will give a tentative plan of action, especially in a fat loss phase, which is usually a goal where people are a little bit more hard on themselves. And I give them a tentative plan of action. Hey, this is going to last between say 12 and 16 weeks, but it's not a nail in the coffin. So say that someone does have some events that are coming up, especially in the summer. There's family events, there's holidays, there are things that are, celebratory that they want to engage in. I would rather, if they are someone that doesn't respond well to those adjustments on the days later, we can literally just adjust the extent or the time length of their diet by 3-4 days a week, whatever it may be. Even if we look at the metabolic adaptation research, there's very good literature from Caddy Martin's group, which looks at the time course for specific amounts of fat loss. And we see that there's what's called a very large amount of response heterogeneity, meaning that there's a big differential between people's responses to the same amount of energy deficit in the goal of losing the same amount of weight. And they see that for every 10 calories of degree of metabolic adaptation, it'll usually slow someone down by 1 additional day. So say that you were someone that really metabolically adapted, you had a 100% or 100 calorie extra decrease on the resting metabolic rate perspective from metabolic adaptation. It would take you 10 more days to reach the same amount of weight loss. So we have to realize that everyone's trajectory is different. Their time course. Don't compare what you see on Instagram, what transformation you see, what your friend Susie is doing down the block. This is your own lane. This is your own process and your own journey. And there really isn't, I always tell this to my clients, there is no end destination. We have checkpoints along the way, and we're going to keep working right past that checkpoint, and we're going to keep working on to the next goal. But it isn't like, hey, listen, you're in week 12. We have to finish it this week. So if you don't compensate or you don't adjust tomorrow, you fuck this whole thing up. That's never the case for me. So like we always have to, I really try to get that across to people. Stop having black and white thinking about not only your approach to nutrition and training and cardio and all these things that are fitness related, but also in terms of the timelines that you put on yourself, because oftentimes people are putting excessive restrictions and restraints on themselves that put additional pressure that no one needs.
Yeah. I mean, the timelines are, not only are they not beneficial to anybody.
You're muted. Aram,
no, it says
Aram, you're muted.
Am I still muted?
You are. It even says you're muted on the on your screen. On my end, it says you're muted.
Yeah, I see it as well.
It says reconnecting.
It's what's fun about this episode. If you watch it on video, Aram's talking as if we can hear him and we're lying to him.
He looks very confused.
Muted. He's like, no, I'm not
he's back.
muted. Like, he's back?
I think. I don't see the
mute thing. Are you there?
Can you hear me now?
No.
You can't hear me.
Nothing. He's gone.
The fuck?
Keep talking, just because that will be one of our preview clips of you talking with no sound, just to confuse.
He's made an impact. This is him wrapping up the episode.
Yeah.
Can you hear me or not? The fuck?
I'm making this a clip. Just you trying to talk. You're muted again. I think we were coming to an end anyway. Is there a chat? Did you want to ask? Was there something you had to ask or share, Rob, and then we can translate it with human words?
Let's see if he's getting to it. But no, ultimately, just to go off of what I was saying, I think Aram can still hear us, correct? Not if you can hear us, Aram. Oh, perfect. All right.
Blink twice if you're in pain.
No, but ultimately, I think a lot of people would benefit from taking just a different approach. Like I spoke about initially, low flux versus high flux. It's not only physiologically getting yourself into a better state of energy availability, energy intake, but it's also the mindset that comes with that. I often speak about trying to transition clients from a mindset of restriction and subtraction to a mindset of abundance and addition. So what can we add to your life that's going to be beneficial to your body composition, to your lifestyle, to your metabolic health? These are things like higher protein intakes, more whole foods, more plant matter, so fruits and vegetables, things with more micronutrients, polyphenols, things of that sort. What type of movement can we integrate and add to your day? Like, make this a movement practice, make this a part of who you are. And when you're able to incorporate proper nutrition in terms of good eating habits, good movement habits, good behaviors, resistance training, you make all that a part of your identity, it becomes something that you can easily integrate day in and day out and keep for the long haul. And that's what really leads to sustainable fat loss and fat loss maintenance, which is what a lot of people are neglecting in this field because they're only focused on the short term.
Can you hear me now or not?
Aram's not coming back. He's doing a lot of miming. He's doing a lot of miming and all that. But I think there was a ton of solid info on here. I know we were coming to an end anyway. Aram, he's gone. He can't even text. He's probably going to try to hop back in real quick so he can catch the end. He's exiting out so he can exit back in. We'll give him a minute of stalling a little bit. I think there's a lot for people to chew on and think about, and just a lot more options and for people to maybe explore from listening to this conversation today, and things that they can experiment with and try. And just to have a better understanding of how these things work. So I appreciate you, man, being on. If he's not back in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, we're going to ask our final question, which you may remember. Bye.
Peace.